Another run inspired by a YouTube comment. I chose this one because it struck me as interesting conceptually. Impossible to die, but you also do basically no damage. Well, it's true that 3 of these characters won't be contributing to the damage output until World 3. And I mean, look at Backlog Buster's video on 4 bards if you need an example of their damage. And plus, just look at what's happening on screen. But while I give the Berserker and Axes a lot of grief, they are capable of big damage when things align properly. Plus, the idea of a party with Chemist in it not being able to do damage effectively sounds like a challenge. I mean, any party with Mix in it can have a damage dealer. You could even buff up the Thief with this party. I mean, just give him a boomerang, stick him in the back row, and dragon power up. Or give him the chicken knife and just go to town with Mug. But I think the main aspect is not being able to control your hitting. For 90% of bosses, this won't be an issue, since, you know, only one target, but there are still encounters that require a more controlled approach. But hey, I like playing support characters, and this party is 75% support, so I was down to try it. I was originally going to try this run in Pixel Freemaster, a mod of the Super Nintendo version that was suggested to me in a comment, and I thought it would just be quality of life stuff, which is the idea that I got from the romhacking.net description. I guess I either didn't read hard enough, or I didn't read between the lines, or I didn't understand something, because right from the start there were a bunch of weird balance changes, like white mages can equip axes and shields, thieves can equip bows, a lot of weird stuff like that. The one balance change I was aware of is replacing the drag spell with a temporary level up, which is first of all insane that they actually buffed the white mage, but after seeing all that, I wanted to keep this vanilla. I'm generally someone who prefers their mods to be purely cosmetic or quality of life, so I'm just sticking with Project Demi for the time being. Pixel Freemaster still seems cool, and it's clear that a lot of effort went into modding the game with all the changes they made. It's just not for me. I will admit though, I was extremely tempted purely for the press L and R to switch between characters in the equip menu thing. That is legitimately my least favorite thing about the SNES version. All these bosses continue in the background, some random things about them. Several fights, even past Garula, took over 10 minutes of plinking away with staves or knives, because I either didn't have Berserker yet, or I needed the Berserker dead to avoid super devastating counterattacks. Early on, relying on staves and the flail is irritating because along with basically doing no damage, they also have the axe thing of having an extremely high damage variance. The ship graveyard was actually a good place to grind early on because almost everything is undead, so if I needed money or a couple levels for a boss, I could just stop by there. Not coincidentally, Siren was also by far the easiest boss out of the initial 4, and she's probably the boss that the white mage is best against in the whole game. On the other hand, Garula was by far the most annoying. He starts out being a counterattack focused boss, and then when his HP gets to about half or 2/3 or something, he starts counterattacking twice. So eventually I decided to have my 3 staff mages be purely support, while Bartz whittles away his 1000 plus health with a single flail. And again, wide damage range. Why can you not buy flails before Karnak? I'm not sure how long it would take if I were to use all 4 party members the entire fight, but it probably would have been a lot faster than the 11 minutes it did take. Alright, let's actually start this run for real. While this is not a common thing to say, thank God for the Berserker. I went with knives for hopefully obvious reasons, and their damage output is a welcome change. The way I do this fight makes the boss very counter-heavy, with not many opportunities to heal, and I opt not to revive a few times just because I know they'd immediately get floored by flame, but Cura and the heal staff are just good enough to keep me alive throughout the fight. I'm unsure if I should even bother showing Ironclaw anymore if I don't have a blue mage. He barely has any more HP than regular enemies, and honestly I'm more afraid of the Gygases in the castle than him. 3 Berserkers and a White Mage is basically turn-based combat distilled into its most pure form. It should be boring, and I guess it kind of is, but for some reason I really enjoy keeping 3 bots alive while I frantically Cura. One of the few times Byblos can actually be a problem is if your team is majority physical damage. This wasn't a huge issue in the worst jobs run because I had Geomancer, but here the issue isn't just the protect counter or the drain counter. It's both combined. Drain will hit more often than not if he decides to do it, and if he's already protected himself, which is extremely likely given how many times he gets physically attacked, then he will consistently heal more than he's damaged for. And it gets even worse if he decides to land Sonic Wave to halve your level. That character might as well be dead weight at that point. So without excessive grinding, this fight felt kinda luck-based, but it only took 2 tries, so it could have been significantly worse. By the way, after Byblos, if a boss is skipped, just assume I Death Scythed it. You get access to Crescent and the Harvesters after this guy, so I always try to stock up on a bunch of Death Scythes. You never really think about how many counter bosses there are until you have a Berserker around. Well, similar to the worst jobs run, this fight has to be done super slowly, but with 2 jobs that are even worse at doing damage than the Thief and Geomancer. The Chemist at least has a positive strength stat, but these guys have some of the worst strength in the game. You might think that the Berserker would have a 1/3 chance of hitting the Sandworm, but according to the solo Berserker run that I read once, apparently in the SNES version there's actually 6 targets. For what reason? Who knows? I assume it's for the same reason that bosses like Neo Exdeath have dummy targets that you can't target normally. I don't know if it was ever fixed or changed for future ports or re-releases. I'll just choose to keep Berserker dead no matter what. I feel like this one was infinitely more tedious than the worst jobs run. This fight took about 11 minutes with intermittent speed-ups just to keep myself slightly sane, because this fight takes forever for a similar reason as the Wendigo fight. The holes have to take their turn of doing nothing, and every time they do, there's a slight pause. As long as I kept healing whoever was lowest with the heal staff, we basically couldn't lose because the regen song somewhat counteracted the sap damage from quicksand. This run is definitely starting a lot worse than the worst jobs run, but I'm holding out hope for Worlds 2 and 3 for the real good stuff. The first few attempts against Soul Cannon went so poorly that I actually, for the first time, went to go grind money for an Angel Ring against the 5 Dark Flames north of Crescent. They're vulnerable to Stop Song, which renders them completely harmless, so it's just a matter of letting the Berserkers whittle them away. It's a great source of Gil and ABP in World 1 if you don't have control for the prototypes, if you don't have a Thief to steal some of the good equipment for Gil, or if you're too afraid of the Skull Eaters in Jackal Cave. But it turns out I was getting extremely unlucky against the launchers, and I overleveled a little too much. But the levels were accidental because I mostly wanted Gil anyway. Here's another note to add onto the pile of things that seems to be wrong on the Final Fantasy wiki. They say that the launchers have 10,000 health, which I already knew wasn't true. but one of the Berserkers take out a launcher on their first turn, so they don't even have 1/10 of that. Probably just an extremely lucky roll, but I guess my failed attempts were full of the Berserkers hitting the cannon instead of the launchers, which were holding them. I tried at first using Stop Song, because they are vulnerable to it, and I even use it here, but unfortunately they're heavy, so it probably only lasts a couple seconds. Thanks to the White Mage, I'm able to Asuna the ult away if it does happen, but I'm pretty sure the effects of ult don't go away. It just prevents your stats from going any lower, but whatever. The cannon has an unnecessarily high amount of health, and whatever it does is easily undone by a couple Curas, so once the launchers are gone, the fight is as good as done. Archeoaevis specifically makes me think I overleveled too much. I almost hit 1000 damage at a couple points, which maybe I'm just getting super lucky with damage rolls for once, but that's still a lot. I'm level 22 right now, which is definitely higher than I usually am, but I didn't think it was that high. After all the buffs get set up, I'm just playing the reaction game to heal any full party damage this guy might do, which is very easy. You know what comes next, though. Yep, it's Mix. Everybody already knew that was coming because Chemist was in it, but I always get excited at the prospect of becoming instantly overpowered. The bosses in this game are lucky that I don't have consistent access to Dragon Fangs until World 2, because I would be Dragon Powering all over their asses. You can get them in World 1, but I think they're rare steals from something, I forget what, and I never have Thief and Chemist in the same run, so I've never needed to know. Purobolos is an extension of the 5 Black Flames encounter. Stop Song repeatedly, wait for the Berserker to do the rest. Stop Song is just a great song for most encounters through the game. It's super easy to shut down all opposition by just dedicating one of your party members to permanently immobilizing the entire enemy team. I'm very surprised they give you a debuff song like this in World 1. Also, if they're stopped, they don't do their Arise reaction on death. The wiki is wrong about that, by the way. So there's not even a super bad tedious factor. Still hate these guys though. I actually managed to hit Gilgamesh a couple times with silence, but unfortunately, since he's heavy, it doesn't last very long at all. Oh well. This fight is more of the same though. Protect up and keep everyone healed while waiting for Berserker to clean up. When I got to World 2, I was actually wondering if there would be a worse physical attacker, because with Mix, it was clear from the very start that the go-to strategy for particularly hard bosses is going to be Dragon Powering up. But like I mentioned earlier, even replacing Berserker with something like Thief would still be busted, because the Thief can use boomerangs, so it can be buffed in the back row, and it would have Mug, which means you can attack with a chicken knife without fleeing, and the Thief has the best agility. But that's not even considering the Thief gives me Steel, which means more money early game, and World 1 Dragon Fangs. But again, I didn't expect this run to be difficult. I mean, any run with Chemist in it is going to be easy, but I would like to hear what other people would consider no restrictions worst job combinations with no repeats. The worst jobs video was definitely a contributor to worst job combination, because they basically don't help each other whatsoever. I've heard a couple suggestions, like this guy wrote up his thoughts on a Thief, White Mage, Bard, Geomancer team, and that definitely sounds bad, but I'm always up for hearing more. There's always Final Fantasy V videos to make. A thought experiment. I wonder who has heard this game's boss theme the most. There's probably people that have heard this game's music more than the composers themselves, right? And I wonder if I'm in the top 1,000, or top 10,000, or even top 100. Things to think about. Also, I want to take this fight to say, I hate dance. I hate dance so much. This is 100% on me for using the dancing dagger, but I'm leaving this fight unedited to see the insane odds I got for this fight. He was sword dancing his ass all the way up Barrier Tower, but we get up to Atomos and he's draining his MP like his life depends on it, and as if he doesn't have 10 goddamn thousand to chew through. I hate dance so much. Between mix and white magic, I actually have so many buffs that it's difficult to keep track of them all, and the menu doesn't exactly do a good job of keeping track either. I even considered having reflect rings for this fight, but I didn't want to complicate the buffing process by having to do everything by mix, since that basically makes white magic totally useless. This fight I was actually okay with dance being kinda shitty for most of it, because it let me set up enough before he got to his second phase where he starts shitting out tons of deadly magic and physicals. I intentionally didn't farm for Dragon Fangs because I just wanted to see how well I could do with a mix that was only half as good, but unsurprisingly, that mix is still super overpowered, it just takes twice as long. I do wish I'd grinded the Dragon Fangs for other reasons though. I mean, it's not like grinding them would be difficult. I have a gold pin, and I have rays. The zombie dragons would stand no chance. I don't show the gargoyle fights, like, ever, but in this run in particular, since I don't have a good multi-targeting strategy, I figured maybe going full Death Scythe would be a good solution. It kind of is, in a way, because these guys aren't very dangerous when we're back row protected, but it sure is tedious. I don't even win because I proc 2 Death Scythes in a row. I win because one of them fusioned into the other, and then they get Death Scythed. Since Melusine is very element heavy, it's very fortunate that the pyramid has some dragon enemies to give some free dragon fangs, because I can use Mix to make myself immune to most of her elements. This is what I was referring to earlier, by the way, with the I wish I had farmed for dragon fangs for other reasons. I'm just glad the game has my back here. Speaking of, I've mentioned a lot that putting, for example, white magic on a non-white mage will give that job the white mage's magic stat, but did you know that giving someone equip harps gives that job the bard's agility? It probably also gives them the bard's magic. I don't really care. The important thing is the agility, because that's what boosts the chicken knife damage. So in World 3, we actually do have a notable choice here. We could go for the chicken knife with equip harps for greater damage potential, but more chances to do nothing. Or we could go with the Rune Axe, put white in the secondary slot to boost the magic stat, and hope that I don't miss so much. At least if I go with the Rune Axe, I could give the chicken knife to the Chemist, because that's the only other job I have with a strength bonus instead of penalty. On another note, specifically the pyramid, Bard would have been quite nice to use there, because most of the monster chests are for undead enemies, and Requiem would have been a fantastic tool if I had remembered to get it in World 2. I honestly can't believe I forgot to get it. At least I had Curaga as a substitute, but it only does like a third of the damage, and even with the gold pin, I don't have infinite MP. We also get the Earth Hammer and the Thornlet finally, which is also a good substitute for Requiem in the latter half of the pyramid, so that's some legitimately good party damage that has been lacking for this whole playthrough. Not that this party has been doing poorly whatsoever. I've just noticed that this would definitely be something written in red text if I was making an overlay ranking all the parties I've done on this channel. I've never been so excited to get Apollo's Harp before. I can grind Dragon Fangs like nobody's business. We have all the songs, we have Infinite Dragon Fangs, the Magic Lamp, a Max Chicken Knife with an agility boosting ability, Arise and Dispel. Nothing could go wrong. Ah, right. Well, if you're interested in seeing the stupidest Wendigo fight thus far, this is your segment to watch. I'm very fond of the stat songs. You can see the insane healing upgrade that Curaga gets later, after the magic song goes for 90% of the fight. I mostly did it to upgrade the Rune Axe, but it didn't seem to do much for it. The Hero and the Power Song seem to help it just fine, so I'm not sure what's up with the magic song. Maybe I just don't understand how the songs actually work. No, wait, that's definitely the case, because I'm convinced the speed song does nothing at all. My bad, Lena. I really should test it more, but the speed song effects must be extremely slight. I don't see the point of using it if you have access to haste. Not every 4-job Fiesta run will have it, so if you have a Bard, but don't have Time Mage, Chemist, Samurai, or Freelancer, then it's a decent substitute. But it just feels like one of the lesser songs to me. You know, I'll give it up, the Rune Axe is impressing me with white equipped. Even with no to few level up mixes, the damage is very impressive once it hits. Even more impressive is that something actually happens during the Omniscient fight. I don't really have any magic to hit him with, so unfortunately I have to do the waiting out the MP thing. But while I was messing around with all the stat up songs, I finally did test the speed up song, and my god. That is just beautiful. Sorry I ever thought you were useless, speed song. Oh yeah, having Holy is great too. Okay, before the real fight, someone please tell me why this happened. What the fuck? I mean, realistically, I can take a pretty good guess as to why that happened. He starts attacking more frequently when he's at low health, but I'm just surprised that that's never happened to me before. I'm sure that double tidal wave has happened to me in the past when I had coral rings on, but I guess it's never happened when I've had no coral rings. The Leviathan fight, regardless of your party, is usually not very remarkable. If you do have coral rings, he's a total cakewalk. And even without them, if your damage is high enough, you can just shred him before he even gets to that point. Especially with Shell, although 2 tidal waves back to back even with Shell will still do pretty sizable damage. But yeah, this fight is about the same as most in the game. Nothing remarkable. I basically couldn't ask for a better Ba-Ha-mut fight. No axe misses, constant insane damage output. This is what you want out of the Berserker when you roll it in a 4-job Fiesta. Granted, she's being built up by all the other 3 party members, but that's the name of the game this run. Support hell, but there is a Berserker. Against Calofisteri, usually I'd equip a Reflect Ring to make her waste turns buffing herself, even more so now that I have Dispel, I can just get rid of her buffs that way. But she was nice enough to do it herself and bounce Reflect off herself and onto me. I'm not sure why she did that. I figured the way her AI works, she wouldn't deliberately give me Reflect, but she did, and that means we take almost no damage for the entire fight. Apanda takes a bit to go down only because Barth's accuracy is making up for the constant hits during Calofisteri. Apanda only has 20 evasion, so, well, you know axes. He catches me in my complacency with a Wind Slash early on, but I'm able to recover pretty quickly. Having access to a Rise for only 25 MP is one of my favorite things about this job. By far, my most hated thing about turn-based RPGs, just as a genre, is you revive a dead party member with an item or spell, and then before you can act again, the enemy smacks them down with some attack, killing them again. I hate that shit. Being able to skip the second part of that makes the healing game much more enjoyable. First off, I'm running the chicken knife here because on my first attempt, he actually whiffed every single attack, and he attacked like 10 times before I just reset. And this guy only has 10 evasion. I hate axes a lot. Anyway, once we get into the castle part of the Void, we get access to all the Dancer equipment and Thor's hammer. I ranted about the Dancer stuff in the Worst Jaws video, so let me do that for Thor's hammer for a second. This weapon comes at basically the worst possible spot in the game. I'll acknowledge first off that on a regular first time run, this weapon might be pretty good if you're using Berserker because you most likely don't know about the magic underflow glitch if you're on Super Nintendo, or you don't know about the Rune Axe adding magic to the damage formula. I didn't even know that until earlier this year. Or maybe you just picked up the Titan Axe on the waterfall and you've been using that. But when you do know about those things, this hammer loses a lot of cool utility for a back row weapon. The Gaia hammer, even when it's not being used for the Quake spell, can still be used ignoring row. So it's a good back row weapon even without the underflow glitch. And again, the Rune Axe just shits out damage if you have the right secondary ability. I really think that maybe Thor's hammer should have been placed earlier in the game somewhere. Maybe Exdeath's castle in World 2. Maybe the pyramid and the Gaia hammer can be placed even earlier. I mean, you can steal it from Titan if you're lucky enough. I don't know, but this weapon basically gets no chance to shine. And because the Berserker can't be controlled, that means you can't swap weapons or row, so you have to commit to whatever setup you have going into a boss. Disappointing, but it's a neat novelty at least. With Chemist on our side, we can once again ignore his Toad move, and fights like this always make me wish for a row switching move, specifically for Berserker. If he gets hit with Reverse Polarity, or Dynamo, or whatever the port wants to call it, the Berserker gets unfairly impacted more than any other job. Instead of buffing the Time Mage to increase a party member's level, can you swap out Drag for a Reverse Player's Row spell? Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with time or space, but neither does increasing level, and this isn't nearly as overpowered. Plus, it works as a support spell, and Time Mage is a support class. Mostly, anyway. While I said I'd skip over any Death Scythe fights, I at least think the setup to this one makes it noteworthy. I didn't get a full set of Coral Rings, else I'd use that, but a hasted White Mage makes certain that we'll make it to the charging phase. The only question is, who's gonna get the killing blow? What a glory hog. First off, death potions galore to make sure I'm not getting constantly bombarded with this reflect shit. Chill is fantastic, but even it has its limits with 4 dickheads throwing non-stop level 5 and 6 magic on me. Once there's only one of them, I'm free to set up everything I need for Necrophobe himself. Shell, Protect, Image, Haste, Hero Song. This is probably the most that Necrophobe has ever gotten destroyed on this channel. I really wish I'd utilized death potions more in the level 1 run. There's a lot of fights I would do slightly differently or more efficiently were I given the chance. That's not going to be done anytime soon, believe me. But food for thought. Well, this is it, right? This fight is what everything has been building up to, using the first phase to set up everything I have. Obvious stuff like Protect and Shell. Haste I just always have with the Hermes Sandals, using all the songs, Image, even that instant death protection mix that I only use because Exdeath was being way more white hole happy than he usually is. It definitely helped. He wasted a lot of turns using it, but once we're set up, we move on to the main event. This fight finally demonstrates one of the biggest weaknesses of this team. Fitting since the whole run I haven't been very good against multiple targets. Unfortunately, at least in the Super Nintendo version, there's Berserker only dummy targets, so whether it's the low accuracy of axes or the fleeing of the chicken knife, his accuracy is even lower than usual. If I get knocked out, it's actually a really big setback having to set everything up again, especially with Ferris out of the picture for a majority of the fight singing away. If I were to change one thing about this fight, I definitely would have gone less hard on the songs. This fight is a rare example of having so many options that I'm actually overwhelmed with stuff to do, between all the buffing, or deciding to say nuts to that, just holy something. And as amazing as this party is, since my main damage dealer has less than a fourth chance to hit what I actually want to, I get Almagested a couple times for my trouble. Every section just has so much health that even with all the holies being flung around, my damage just can't keep up. That alone is a testament to how powerful this team is, by the way, that I can survive multiple of them and still win. I'm thankful that the damage of it can be reduced, but man, it still hurts a lot. But hey, I didn't have to resort to grinding to survive it like some other runs. My levels are actually pretty low for the end of the game, around 10 less than most playthroughs do, but you definitely would expect that for a run with the White Mage and Mix. As a side note for this run, if you have a bard in your party for a Forged Up Fiesta, you can beat Omega for free because he can be infinitely stun-locked with the stop song. That was something I thought of after watching Backlog Buster's video on the 4 bards, is that it struggles so hard against basically everything in the entire game, but against what I consider to be the hardest fight in the game, it actually has no problem whatsoever. Funny how that works. It's just too bad Omega doesn't give anything, unlike Shinryu. Speaking of Shinryu, depending on how quickly you can get set up, you could use this team to Berserk Shinryu and try to outlast him with Haste and Protects, but that would be extremely difficult. He hits really hard, so that's usually a strategy reserved for a knight using cover. But anyway, yeah, I think this run embodies the true spirit of the support main. You have one guy not doing what he's supposed to, while the rest of the team throws all their weight behind him in hopes that he eventually gets steered in the right direction. I feel like there's a comparison to be made with Overwatch or TF2 or insert hero shooter here, but since I don't play those games, I'm underqualified to speak in this case. Despite how frustrating it might be on the surface, I actually do enjoy gameplay like this a lot. Being the support god, being able to think fast with all the tools at your disposal, deciding what order to use all your moves for the most optimal recovery for any errors or KO'd party members. In our Stranger of Paradise run, I was the support mage, and the Sage job is basically the Black Mage, White Mage, and Time Mage all fused together into one super fun magical amalgamation. It's one of the most fun gameplay experiences I've had in an action RPG. I wish Tales of Healers could be more like that. I might actually play as them in those games. Basically what I'm trying to get at is that this party is almost purely reactive, and that's novel. I wouldn't recommend this run to most players because, I mean, did you see the first 80% of World 1? But once you get going, you really just don't stop. Well, I've said all I really need to say. See ya.